the traumas comes from the first one, the first marriage. That's also trauma. Trauma is what happens inside, right? It's not the event, it's the feelings that's inside. So if those are not resolved, it will just carry on. Yeah.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome back to Coach Soul. I am so happy to have Therese back, and thank you so much for joining me. You know, we've done a podcast before, but it was mainly on EQ therapy, and she is from Norway, and some great stuff that came out of that conversation coming together. Recently, I graduated from Liberty University, and she has had the opportunity to read my work. She is a therapist, and so I'm going to turn this over to you, and a little different because you'll be interviewing me in this go around. So welcome to Coach Soul.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations with your
Thank you.
study. I really, really liked what you wrote. And yeah, it's I made many notes, and I look forward to talk with you about this. And let me just ask you, how was it for you to interview these people, and how did you like it? Was it difficult? How was it?
You know, in my bachelor's, I did get a minor in communications. So I used to do a lot of journalism, radio, disc jockey, broadcasting, those type of things. And so this kind of fell in my lap for those who I met because I knew one, but didn't know really well. And I simply asked and they said yes. And from there, it just kind of took a snowball effect. What she's referring to is I was able to get a hold of 11 people, 9 females, 2 males. And what is interesting is stories. I enjoy stories. I enjoy true stories. I watched the movie the other day based upon some Hispanic golfers that had a hard time in America in trying to make it in the golfing world as far as for the Mexican race. It's just fascinating to hear people's stories. That's why I enjoy talking to you because you are from Norway, and that is just fascinating to me to say, okay, we're on different time zones. She's PM, I AM. And so, Teresa, I mean, it's just fascinating to be able to talk to people.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And you also mentioned that it was 2 men and 9 women. So, and also you question if that is wrong because it's so few men. But I think really not. I think it's universal emotions and experiences. And so what do you think about that?
You know what was funny? There was carved 10 minutes out of the dissertation time for the interrogations, what I call it. It's just them questioning. And I only had one question from my reader. And he's a qualitative professor. And we began to discuss. And the question was, how come only 2 men?
Yeah.
I did ask other men, 5 other in fact, and those 5 other never connected with me, never responded to my request. The 2 men that did talk to me was in their 60s and 70s, but it seems like the younger generation does not want to open up. And I find this in my private practice that most men do not want to discuss or air out their stuff because it comes across as weakness. As noted in my dissertation, there's a research study that came out in 2023 that said, hey, this is a universal issue that majority of men do not want to talk. What is your perspective? I mean, you're in Norway and you're doing therapy with couples and individuals and things like that. What are you finding about men on that other side of the world?
I think it's the same here, actually. I think it's universal. And also the culture about, you said it come across as weakness. And I think many men has experienced that in their their upbringing, that they shouldn't be vulnerable or shouldn't show emotions as much. But they still do, right? The most anger actually is more common in men to express any feeling, if you see what I mean. So I hope we are on the right track in getting men also to talk more. And I have many men in therapy, and yeah, they do open up when they first come here. Yeah,
it is important, men, speaking to our listeners and those who view us on YouTube, it's important to be able to connect with your female. That's how they connect with us, is through communication. They want to know your world. It is not a sign of weakness. I mean, I've had my fair share of trauma, those type of things growing up. And then, of course, in my own marriages and divorces that I've been through, this is what prompted the study of blended families. What is it that we need to do to keep them together? And probably getting ahead of myself on your questioning, but one of the things that came out was the unhealed trauma.
Yes.
If we have unhealed trauma in our childhood, it goes into our first marriage. If that's not resolved, now you have two bags that come full into the third. And so therefore, or the second. And so that's where that divorce rate, 65% or higher are divorced. But that's the United States statistic back in 1990s, and the lack of funding stopped. So I'm not sure what the divorce rate would be.
I so agree with you, what you say, the emotional trauma from childhood in the first place. And that's the reason for the communication that breaks down also, I think, because that's one of the things that is mentioned as a reason for divorce. And I think that, for preventing divorce, first time, second time, third time, whatever, I think it's therapy. I think it should be what everyone did before they got married or got kids, actually. Yeah. So I think also the trauma comes from the first one, the first marriage. That's also trauma. Trauma is what happens inside, right? It's not the event, it's the feelings that's inside. So if those are not resolved, it will just carry on. Yeah. And
that's one of the things that I'm trying to do too, is change the language to have ownership. Triggers doesn't set well with me. Well, that triggered me. It's almost like an outward projection, what hurt me. I'm trying to change the lingo to Splinters. I've got a book that I'm working on in regard to when you think about the wounds and traumas that we have, there's splinters that's within us.
yes.
And we're stimulated, is what I call it, by the whatever is happening. So if we can recognize I have a splinter that irritated me, then we're taking ownership of our pain. And one of the things I try to work with my clients on is how to remove, what ways can we remove that splinter? It hurts going in, is going to hurt coming out. And I think that's a lot of times reasons why most men don't want to talk, is because it is extremely hurtful. And of course, we're told as men, don't cry, rub some dirt in it. If you're going to cry, I want to give you something to cry about. That's what's been known here in the United States. Have you found that to be true there in Norway?
What exactly?
Where men are told to keep quiet, not to express emotion.
Yes, that's also here, exactly the same. So, I mean, they learn that when they are children, right? Don't cry, up again. It's nothing to cry about. So they learn to suppress the grief or the pain. So it's scary to take that pain out when you are an adult, because you only remember how painful it was. So we just lock it down. So yeah, but it's so necessary. That's how to release splinters or traumas, or that's exactly how it is. So
Sure.
yeah, but back to your study about, you say these takeaways from the study is financial strains and communication breakdown. And the last one was boundaries in Mosaic families. Do you want to talk a little bit more about these three topics that you highlight?
So with boundaries, what I'm finding is that it's very difficult to maintain in blended families. In my research, blended doesn't do service to to that kind of family. I know in Europe you discuss bonus family. Hollywood has just tainted the step family as evil. And so I came up with the term Mosaic family. This is being trademarked. This is some of the work that I'm working on. Bowen family systems theory talks about, the individualization within the family, but it was for the intact family. There's nothing that's working with the Mosaic family. And I describe Mosaic family, they really don't have good boundaries. And so I'm creating what's called a Mosaic family systems theory to help look at where boundaries exist. What I mean by that is you take a child who is, let's say, 9 years old. As a stepfather, it's difficult and challenging because if that's not my child, I have to be careful not to assert discipline or things like that. I did an interview podcast probably several years ago, a friend of mine, that happened. She had adopted a child with her husband. They divorced. She remarried. The adopted father was like a Disney father. This father had more structure. So he disciplined the adopted daughter. And to come find out, long story short, she accused him of things that shouldn't have been accused. The children were taken away because she believed in her husband. And after the children were taken away, it was 2 years later, her child comes back and says, I lied. I was angry. And, we find this oftentimes in blended families where a child gets angry. So I'm going to get back at you, not realizing it's hurting the entire family. So boundaries can get skewed between parents. You have ex-parents that come in and try to play a role of, well, this is not how you're going to treat my child, so to speak. So that becomes blurred lines.
Yes.
And then you have parental roles, grandparent roles, childs, they go between houses, week on, week off, or a split here and there. So it confuses the child as to what boundary do I follow? And so it becomes challenging. The second one, we're going to backtrack a little bit. Communication.
Yes.
Oftentimes, what I found in communication is the fact that one parent would put the child above the other parent. So that's a boundary, but it's also bleeding into communication. When we think about communication, sometimes this child will triangulate, manipulate the situation to gain advantage because this ex-parents, the step-parent or, the biological parent, they're not communicating. And so it leaves a broad door opening for them. Communication, if we have that childhood trauma, we have trauma from the first marriage. It's often like, well, I got married the first time. It made it so easy. I really don't have to put forth much effort, so let's just divorce. And that led to some of the reasons why divorce rates are high among blended families, because we've been there, done that. It's easier to do. And there's lack of accountability to try to communicate.
Yeah.
I'm working on a book now on Mosaic family, piece by piece, my learning experience, because in communication, we're not talking about our issues. A lot of times it comes through how we attach, the learning attachment styles. Creates that communication barrier. And the biggest one of the takeaway that I found was the financial piece. When you have two individual families that are divorcing, and they come together, and that's why I look at it as a mosaic, because it's two broken individual shards, so to speak, that come together. And in mosaic, you have mortar or something that binds the piece together to make a beautiful picture. That's how I see blended family. But when you have financial, I remember, having to pay child support. And when I gained custody, I'm paying exuberant amount of money, changed the laws in Oklahoma, took her back to court, gained custody, and the child support was very minimal to where I didn't want to accept her child support payment because she needed more than I did. So that becomes an issue among blended families because of that. that. You have one ex that will exasperate the family because, well, I'm going to take you back for court to this. I'm going to take just constant. I find this mainly in borderline personality disorders among females. I find it not only in the female, but also in the male, the narcissistic tendencies to try to control. And so one of my people that I interviewed off mic, I spoke to them a little bit more about their case, and her ex-husband is a narcissist and is constantly nitpicking, trying to find ways to control, so much so that he has stalked, violated the protective order type situation. And so that becomes taxing on a family because we're having to spend money on court, having to spend money on child support. And if you have a family that doesn't have, for example, one of them, the biologic father's rights were taken away. So now all this financial responsibility comes on this person. And so that makes it a challenging within blended families.
Yeah, you had some very, very good points, what you say. And also you write about many of these people in the study. They say that after the second divorce, they were devastated and then the healing journey started. The first was painful, but then the second one was even more painful because it was the second time. You want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that is a good thing to start the healing journey, but it's painful. It has to go that far, you know?
You know, sometimes when we're in our first marriage, we think, what? It's my fault.
Yeah.
And we begin to kind of look at it that perspective. But what's happened is in the book that I'm writing, I'm creating a chapter called Sabbatical. It's important that when we leave one relationship, there needs to be a sabbatical, at least a year or more, depending on how long you were married or in a relationship, to find that healing. Because oftentimes, as I think you know, in couples therapy, we hear, well, I lost myself. And so it's difficult to find who I am again. And so oftentimes it's challenging and difficult to try to figure out what to do in the situation. And when you feel like you're hurt, you isolate sometimes. Or if you have that attachment style that's very codependent, you're out seeking the next. In my book, I'm expounding this on a little bit more because I'll be using myself where I started with anxious attachment disorder, kind of codependent, looking for affirmation, looking for that validation of that there's nothing wrong with me, that I'm okay. If we don't heal from those wounds from the child and the marriage, it does bleed over. And what was interesting is out of the 11 people, 2 of them are remarried. The 78-year-old that I mentioned, or 77, he was married 3 times, but his third marriage lasted 20 years. She died of cancer several years back, and they adopted 13 children on top of the 2 biological children. So that was interesting. He said the second marriage really hurt him because that's when he had his child. He didn't have children from the first. It was the second. Another lady that I interviewed, she was Native American. She was an officer in the military. He was enlisted. Forgot to mention that because in that study, I have a father-daughter, a mother-daughter, someone that grew up in the military, someone that was an officer, someone that was enlisted. So it gives perspective. So I think that would be a great research topic to look at marriage and divorce within military families across the world and how that impacts them.
Yes, that's a good thing. So, but how is your view on this? Because I think that I remember myself when I was in my first relationship with the first father of my kids. I have 2 with 2 different fathers. I never been married, but we lived together. And yeah, so I remember it took some time before I understood it was something in me. I was like pointing out something is wrong with him or something is wrong with that, or I didn't look in. So do you experience that when the people start to heal, do they really understand where this comes from? Because it's so easy to say traumas from the marriage. I mean, it's further down earlier, it's childhood. Do they see what they experience?
You know, that's interesting because even my own perspective, you know, from the first marriage, I just remember, yes, I blamed some of it on her. Part of it was my trauma that caused some of this separation to happen between both of us. It wasn't until later that I started realizing when I was taking my children back to court that, hey, I need to start working on who I am as a person. Yeah. And that's what kind of led me into becoming a therapist, was because of the documentation meditation that was done. It's interesting because sometimes it takes an event to kind of wake you up a little bit to say, hey, what's going on here? And that's what I found with the 11 that I've dealt with. Teresa, I just need to leave it here as a cliffhanger. I want to do a part 2 to kind of finish this out because this study is important, not only for clinicians, but also I think for court magistrates and those who are in the law to understand the complexities, because as therapists, I found in interviewing them what course of action they take. I'm going to leave it there because I think it's important for us to come back to. So until next time, take care. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.